cat. So everybody who's listening to this podcast, rather than watching it, we have Elizabeth being assaulted by a cat right now. I was trying to get it when the cat butt was facing the screen because if you've ever owned a cat, that's pretty much 90% of your view.
It really is. It really is. We've been into the cat robotics. Cat. Oh man, the pun is there. It's
What
just
is a
hard.
cat robot?
Acrobatics, but with switch the cat.
That sounds
Robotics.
dangerous.
Well,
Cats are sharp.
they are. They are, but she's
So
all right.
we're here for part 2 of the care and feeding of meat computers, and we talked a lot about the problem of people are not taking care of themselves. They're not taking care of their clients as human beings, and looking at them in the same way they look at a PC. What I know, I need to remember when you used to have to defrag your computer to take care of the hard drive. You used to have, you still have to like patch. You have to maintain. You have to upgrade your computer, add more RAM to it, and we're very good at taking care of these things. But what if we took the same care with ourselves? What if we took the same care with our clients? What would that do to the world today? And then we ended up on the idea that a simple trick to use to kind of start changing the narrative is using the word "and" in conversation and lifting the person up across the table from us. So we really have 2 conversations going on here, Elizabeth, is the care and feeding of others and the care and feeding of ourselves. And this human network that we have. And so if you can layer on your knowledge and topology of the 7-layer OSI stack onto humans, you should be able to build up the community that you're in the same way you think about your network. So let's talk a little bit about what is the solution here, Elizabeth? What are the things that we need to do to take care of ourselves first?
I really want to start this part of the conversation with a little nod to the fact that in our communities, a lot of people are standing up and they're saying, to be successful, you need to be like me. You need to do X, Y, or Z. Hi, can you still see me?
I can.
Can you hear me?
I can.
That was my cat. She knocked my mouse off, and it.
I was thinking, okay, it's like, do I pause it? Do I edit this? No, this is a cat. We're leaving it.
Yeah, this is it.
The assault continues.
So I alluded to this in our last session where there's some people who say to be good at taking care of other people, you need to do these things like me. I've figured this out, like do these things. And that turns into a long list of rules of things to remember. It turns into the golden rule, it turns into all of these little sayings and rules of thumb that we have. And I really, for our technical people that have been told that they just have hard skills and to not worry about soft skills because they're never going to learn them, I really want to encourage our technical friends to consider, technical friends, I'm a technical friend, your life, you don't have to be a set of rules that someone else has given you. Maybe what you need to do is hold yourself and hold others with the same curiosity you would hold a piece of tech. So one of the examples I like to use is when I bought my first Game Boy. I'd saved up my allowance. I was 4 years old. I remember the lighting in the Toys R Us. I remember flipping all of the panels back and forth, trying to figure out what game I wanted, what tag I was going to take to the cash register. So I got Speedy Gonzales and I got my Game Boy and I was like super psyched. And I ended up, I would play in our car rides and I would wait for the street lights so I could get my next level as the street light passed by. I got a magnifying glass, and I
got the lighting kit.
Yeah, I got the lighting kit eventually. 4 and 5 years old, you don't have a lot of cash. But
for those younger audiences out there, for people like Elizabeth and I, when we had Game Boys, they were not backlit, so you had to have either the car lights on or something. But then you could buy this accessory kit. And it had the magnifying that popped out and the 2 speakers that flipped out and then a light that shone down, and you could play all the time. Kids don't know how good you have it today.
Right. You don't know. You're young but I think about that, and I think about the energy that I had when I wasn't playing. I was flipping through the little booklets that they used to sell little booklets in your game, the containers that had, like told you about moves and stuff. And I would read those things backwards and forwards. And my life was consumed by when the next time was that I was going to be able to play, when I was going to be able to use this next cool button combination, memorizing it, writing it down, drawing characters in class. I was consumed by it, and I'm not saying we have to do that about humans, but what if we just said, this human is a cool piece of tech. I'm curious about it. How can I look at that? And I think, and I've, I kind of have broken humans down into, thinking about them as hardware and their software and their operating system and what network they have around them. Because you can't air gap a human. So, that's kind of how I've dealt with new friends or people in the tech industry. That's kind of I've stepped back, and there's things that I personally need in a relationship. But if I can remove myself from that and just hold the other person with curiosity, what does that mean for that relationship, or what can I build on?
I think some of my favorite things, like on the social medias, is the like the memes that say, you know what, no one asks what your favorite dinosaur is anymore.
Ugh, it's rude.
It's a brontosaurus, by the way.
Is it? Is it?
What is Elizabeth's favorite dinosaur?
I think I'd have to go with like a standard like Triceratops, which I don't think
You
is a real
know,
dinosaur
you
anymore.
look like a Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Have you seen
Just got
Bullet
that
Train?
love.
Have you seen Bullet Train yet?
I have, yes.
He
Like
has Thomas the Tank Engine. I
Percy.
just threw everybody Land Before Time. So, so
Well, Land Before Time, I'm a big Ducky fan, of course. That energy, it's a
you got to be
problem.
Ducky fan.
Yeah.
I love Petrie. Petrie was one of mine, but
Yes.
Littlefoot was a little whiny, but Petrie was cool. But the idea here is that these human questions, like what's your favorite dinosaur, that we ask as children, we don't ask that stuff anymore because it seems too intrusive. Can you tell me what your favorite color is? Can you tell me what you like to do in your free time? It's almost embarrassing in the business world because people say, Adam, what books do you read? And I say, I read a lot of sci-fi and fantasy. And they're expecting me to talk about Malcolm Gladwell, Simon Sinek. Yes, I read some of that, but 90% of what I read, lit RPG, good solid fantasy.
Yeah.
And people are like, oh. And I'm like, I enjoy this. It's something I do because I enjoy it. And I want other people to celebrate in their fandoms too. You don't just have to be this machine all the time. Maybe you truly enjoy reading business theory books. Good on you. I can only read so many of those, and I start glazing over as the same idea gets presented to me for the 30th time. But, I want to see the person across the table from me. I want to know what your cares are. I want to know a little bit more about like what actually makes you tick. And in that way, when I'm working with you, I have a better idea of how to lift you up. So I had this trick when I talk to my clients. I shouldn't call it a trick. I would sit with my client and I would listen to them tell their story of their business, what they were trying to do, this origin story. Even in the sales meetings now, I say, don't do a lengthy origin story for yourself when you're selling. You should be interested in your client's lengthy origin story. Yes. That is the trick. So when I listened to my clients tell their story, what they're trying to accomplish, where they came from, what their mission is, and I think, why aren't they using this tech? That's because no one told them about it.
Right.
Because they are too busy selling firewalls and PCs. They're too busy being a Best Buy retailer. They're too busy saying their story. Exactly. And so, I love when I have people like yourself who have the live background there, and I'm like looking at like the different artwork and the different things on shelves,
comic books.
Yeah. And what is there? Like, I want to believe, oh man, is she a fan of a certain TV show? And I'm looking over at the right, and I'm thinking, is that Ori and the Will of the Wisps, or what is that right picture over the tree and the
that is Totoro. There's Totoro and his other little spirits, and Satsuki and Mei from the My Neighbor Totoro Ghibli film.
I have not watched that.
Oh, Adam, you should definitely do that.
I will have to see. Getting to know Elizabeth, I like anime. And anime is an infinite world. You always find out a new little like subgenre that is extremely deep that you need to watch. And so now I have this on my list. I would not have had that on my list if I hadn't looked in the background and saw what Elizabeth's passions are. What is she excited about? You see, if you're watching the video, you see how excited she is. As soon as you have not heard of Totoro? Let me tell you about Totoro. And then maybe, we get into a conversation. And now we are humans. We are now two people having a conversation rather than a guest star on a podcast and somebody I run into at conferences. Now I can have these conversations and we can say, oh, did you see the latest episode? Did you do this? We have these shared experiences that we now have in common. And maybe we talk about, like, you know what? I see this technology. Be really interested in that AI art. I think Elizabeth would, because she really likes that style. She likes that subdued blue purple feel of like Ori Will of the Wisps. Have you played that?
I've not.
You were
No,
missing out.
I'll put it on.
Ori and the Will of the Wisps.
I'm currently
Similar art
working through
style,
all
similar
of the
to
Final
Ori.
Fantasies.
What?
I'm currently working through all of the Final Fantasies. I'm almost
Oh
done with
man,
7. I'd
have
never
fun with
played them
that.
before. Yeah.
I've been
So,
through 4 or 5 of them. 15 was really interesting, kind of a steampunk feel.
oh yeah.
Have you played 15? No?
Nope. No, literally, I just started and I'm almost done with 7. So I've got a little while to go.
You've got a ways. They're good. They're good. I was a big Zelda fan back in the day. I like open RPGs. So I always had a hard time with the Final Fantasies, but now I really enjoy them. I like going back through the retro games. Final Fantasy 15 was a little bit punchy, but it was really cool. So I had a car. I could drive around in a car in that one. And a fantasy.
Yes.
Anyways, we digress. But that's okay. It's okay to digress. It's okay to talk about your passions.
Yes.
What is your own passion? Is your passion fixing firewalls, or is it reading fantasy? Maybe you like romantic novels. Maybe you like cosplay. Maybe you're not even like that nerdy. Maybe you like sports. I like it when people win at the sports that they play. That's my phrase. My kids think it's hilarious. Yes. They're listening in the car right now and they're laughing, I can tell you. Because people are like, what's this game they're playing? It's something about the Final Four, something like that. I don't know.
They're really mad about it.
Yeah,
are they mad during the month of March or something?
Yes,
just angry.
I know that the bandwidth goes up because people are live streaming more. Something. I think there's a Masters tournament as well around this time of year.
Yeah.
What did they do? The most have to do something to do with a ball going into a hole. That's all I know.
You're not going to get much more than that from me. So
exactly. Yeah. I couldn't tell you who even was in the Sweet 16 basketball tournament this year. I even watched part of one of the games because my brother-in-law was watching. But I love it. I love sharing people's fandoms. Even when somebody's like, "Oh, I got to watch the Packers game," and they're sitting down and watching it, and they're really getting into it, I get excited about that. I can follow a football game, especially when somebody's excited about it, and that's okay.
I think I don't know if this is. I mean, this is obviously not a dating show podcast, but I think this applies to anyone that you might be interested in knowing.
Podcast.
Do we really? But I think that's really important. I've listened to my fair share of like pickup artist conversations, podcasts and stuff because it's interesting. It's psychology, and that's a pet interest of mine. But really, a lot of people are like, I want to talk to this person, and I don't know what to say. And it's like, pick out something you like about them. Why do you want to talk to them? And tell them what you like about them. They want to hear it. And I think that's we miss out on that. We're trying so hard to be interesting when the sexiest thing or the most interesting thing to us is that someone is interested. Like I think that's really, we miss out on that energy when you're so busy constructing a whole world of do this, then that, instead of just being in it with someone. I think that you miss so much because you're so busy constructing something else.
I can't wait to tell you about myself, Elizabeth.
Yes. Let me tell you about all of the reasons. And that, I mean, I mentioned last session about like how I think dating apps have ruined our approach to humanity. It's because we're so busy making a laundry list of things we are or that we're looking for that we miss out in the conversations that we could be having.
Oh man, let me tell you about the dating world back in the late 90s. But we talk about dating on this podcast quite a bit because if you treated your clients and the people in your workplace the same way you treat your dates, would there be a second date? If you walked in there and sat across the table with a 3-ring binder full of all the things that make you awesome and why they need to date you, what's going to happen next?
Yeah. I'm disinterested.
What happens?
I'm going to go to the bathroom and pay for the check and leave.
That's the Irish goodbye. We talk about this, but on our site right now, if you go to our website, we actually have this thing called the 2 Qs. And we should not have to put that out there. And it's the 2 questions to ask your clients to instigate good conversation. What are the biggest risks to your company and what are the biggest sources of revenue? I'll tell you right now. You can go download the PDF if you want. It's really pretty. Anyways, but what it comes down to is we're trying to show technical people that the conversation changes when you change the focus to the client. And it's not a trick, it's not a gimmick, it's just human behavior. If you put the person across the table from you first, not in this, I'm going to trick them into liking a firewall. If you come in there already thinking, I'm going to sell firewall, I'm going to sell a SAN, I'm going to sell network devices, you've lost. If you walk in and say, I need to learn what this company is trying to accomplish so I can think of the 10,000 solutions in my head, which will benefit them. So Adam Walter is known for telling stories. At least that's my understanding. I've got a story for everything. So I could sit here all day on this podcast without a guest speaker and just tell stories. But what I'm looking for Elizabeth's life and what stories I can tell her. And that will integrate into her life. And she can feed off and tell me stories about her. Like just a few minutes ago, we started talking about anime. We suddenly discovered that we have something in common here. I'm a huge fan of Arcane. Like, I think Arcane is one of the best things to happen on Netflix.
It's beautiful
It
too.
is
If you
just,
haven't watched Arcane, like,
if you haven't watched Arcane
yeah,
and you like even a little anime, watch it. But if we had sat here and talked about business strategy and just the carrying and feeding of computers, of meat computers, we would have never learned that about each other. But the fact that she put that personal thing in her background that I can see over her shoulder, and she has these posters, and I can see on the bookshelf a lot of things like, man, Elizabeth and I are long lost friends. We could probably kill a few days talking. I see on your shelf that you have it looks like a Legos.
yeah,
Client sent me this. I built this the other day.
beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah,
my Lego
yeah.
unicorn. So we could share our love of Legos. We could share our love of geek culture, and we can run with that. And I do the same thing with my clients. I can tell you with any client I've sat across the table from, I try to learn something about them. And it's a priority for me because I genuinely want to know. I'm
I
curious.
I think that's really, one of the ways I alluded to that I've kind of broken down some of the conversations I've had about the care and feeding of meat computers is, you know, hardware that's kind of given to us. We're humans with, brains and meat suits, and electrical impulses run it. But if you think about above that, what our operating system is, that's created by our families of origin, by our experiences, by, and so as we're having these conversations, I can say a thing with a certain intention, use a word that you might not love, like moist or whatever, and you're already stuck on that word. You're stuck on that word, so you can't remember exactly the rest of what I said. So there's different levels of our operating systems that it's inefficient to talk to humans, and so finding things that you can connect on helps your conversation get pre-processed
Hmm.
into that other person's operating system. And I think we forget that humans are just complicated plants, or meat computers. We're just complicated versions, and if we can kind of break that apart and use the same technology, the same ideas that we would use for troubleshooting or communicating with software programs like we do with humans, I can help our conversations by finding those connections, and translate those libraries, if I may.
Well, I'm going to make a recommendation to you based upon what you just said.
Listening.
In our podcast, we have episodes 216 and 217, where Sean Mayer came on, and he was an author of a book called Stop Wasting Words.
Hmm.
And it's all about having conversations with people and through having conscious communication and deliberately focusing on how am I communicating with the person with me? Not wasting words, but actually
Mm.
like saying things and having meaningful conversation that cares for each other and lifts each other up. And
Yeah.
one of the side benefits to this is the fact that by caring for Elizabeth here, she wants to care for me back. And it creates that positive feedback loop where we want to care for each other without each other's permission. I would say, hey, Elizabeth, here's what I need you to do for me. Sometimes you need to do that, but that should be a rare situation. You should be able to say, Elizabeth and I talking, and we start thinking, wow, I can, in my daily life, I think, oh man, Elizabeth love this. I'll send it to her on LinkedIn or via Messenger. And, it makes her day a little better. And she may go through and think, oh, the new Arcane episode came out. I'm going to message Adam on that. What did you think of this moment? It becomes this positive feedback loop where we are deliberately using words that matter and enable the person across from us and help us to become something more than just two people. And
And that takes time.
that is the power of that. Now you're taking care of the network of humans around you while focusing on yourself. And the more positive you are with yourself, the more mindful you can be in these conversations. And so I want to move into a next step here for the last 5 minutes of this podcast and say, Liz, what are your top tricks for taking care of meat computers?
Well,
Give
like
me
you,
three tricks. So that's the way the world works.
three
Give me
tricks. It
three.
does. Top three. Let's do a BuzzFeed article right now. The first, the first thing that I would say, the most important thing, and we've alluded to this a couple times, is you put your mask on first. You know, I've worked at and talked with people who have unlimited PTO for everybody, but how many days has the owner actually taken? And I think, you know, going back to what's your uptime, do you sleep? You know, have you taken time off? I worked at a packaging plant where they made soda cartons for like made cartons for soda and beer, and they have glue machines that all they do is take a piece of paper, put glue on it, fold it, and then press it and send it through. And those have scheduled downtime. So if a if a thing that just glues paper has scheduled downtime every year, where is yours? So that would be the first thing, is put your mask on first. The second thing is, like I said,
So feedback on that.
yeah,
If you have unlimited PTO in your organization, there is a second policy that most people forget about, and it's called forced vacation. You, as in a technical world, especially, there are so many benefits to this. I cannot explain it. You must force your engineers and your technical resources to take a week off continuous, where they cannot answer their phone. You have to do that, especially if you
yeah,
have unlimited PTO. If you do that, it'll make your organization healthier, more efficient, and you'll make more money. That one policy needs to supplement the other, because otherwise, what Elizabeth is saying is true. You won't take care of yourself, and your company will become too dependent on one resource. And that is not healthy for anybody. So, step number one is
mask on first.
mask on first. Take care of your own self first.
Yes.
Lead
Um,
by example.
right. And because a lot of times people will be like, I don't, you know, I want to take time off, but my owner doesn't. I kind of feel guilty about that. So anyway, set the example first. The second thing I would say is, one of the things that we talked about is ask questions, read the manual, talk to people, see what see what operating system they're on, see what things are impacting their lives. I said slyly earlier, you can't air gap a human. The person who stole their parking spot, the argument they had with their wife, the fact that their kids made them late because they wouldn't put their shoes on. Those are all things in their one single human brain that they're going to be taking throughout their day. And so be aware of the things that are going to be impacting the humans in your life, and take care of those things by reading the manual and being aware of them.
That'd be an
Any
interesting
feedback
exercise. If you had to write a manual for yourself for the proper care and feeding of Elizabeth, what would that manual look like?
there? Ooh. You want me to answer that right now?
Must watch anime for at least 20 minutes per day.
Yeah, I mean, for
Must
me,
have one nutty bar per week.
yeah, I mean, I have a little list of things. I've been trying to get up and have a walk in the morning. I do some sort of yoga where I just stretch and check in with my body, and then I have a cup of coffee where I use an AeroPress and I stir it. I stir the coffee 80 times before I press it. I and that just is the start of my day. So
Yeah,
I've got a little
you've
manual.
got a well-defined manual.
Yeah. But I mean, I think a lot of people, and the thing about that too, Adam, I think it's important, is that changes. Uh, that I have to think through each season of my life, each quarter, and what I have going on, and be willing to change it according to my energy and experience, and activity. Like,
Yeah. Who Adam was in his 20s is very different than who he is in his 40s. The worst thing you can say to Adam is you haven't changed. And
yeah,
yeah, when I talk to people, and I cannot remember this article. If somebody out there can remind me where this article is, because Sebastian's asked me where it is. It's in your life. You are 7 different people throughout your life.
mm, hmm,
And who are those people, and who are you becoming, and taking care of each of those individuals as who they are. Maybe
mm,
today you don't enjoy the same thing you did, 7 years ago or 10 years ago. That's okay. adapt to your new situation and what makes you happy and what's going to care for you. I think that's great. I love the idea of what's impacting the humans around you. Read the manual. If you had to write a manual for yourself today, what would that look like?
Yeah.
There's your next book.
Right. Write yourself a manual, and I mean, ask other people what they want. And I mean, yeah, ultimately, yeah, ask people what they want. Don't just jump into a problem and say, "Here's the solution." You know,
Yeah,
there's
I even tell my
steps
kids
in
like
troubleshooting is to replicate it.
I tell my kids like if you see me having a stress day, what your first thing you're going to see, my tell, I will start playing more video games when I'm stressed. I
Yeah.
will eat more. I'm a stress eater. And if you see me doing those things, dad needs more hugs.
Mm, that's great. That's
You
exactly
know,
right. Yeah.
that is what you can do for me, or you can do something nice for me, like a service. The Five Love
Yes.
Languages is a book I recommend everybody read, regardless of your affiliation. Read that book because it is a gold mine of how to treat human beings.
Mm,
And so I inform people like if you see me stressed, here's how you can tell if Adam is stressed because sometimes I don't recognize it myself.
yeah.
If you see me stressed, more hugs. Do something nice for me. Those are things that I care about.
Yeah.
Affirmations, eh. I know
Right.
some people
Show
love
me
their
something.
affirmations. If you like your affirmations, I'm good with that. But that's part of my manual. That's
Yeah.
part of who Adam
Yeah.
is. So, with
Yeah.
Elizabeth, what is your self care? Your yoga, your 80
Hmm.
times of
Hmm.
stirring your AeroPress. The things that help calm you down and care for you. Those are
Yeah.
great things to know.
Hmm.
If I'm at a conference to see Elizabeth making her coffee and stirring it, I'll be like, okay, leave her alone. She's counting.
I mean, yeah, it came from I would forget. I would get, I'd lose myself in counting. And I was like, okay, well, I guess this is just it grew each time. And now it's stuck at 80. And I think it's just a number that's stuck in my
That's
head.
okay.
But anyway,
All right. So,
um,
tip number 3.
tip number 3, I would say always keep up with your firmware updates. There's always going to be something new. There's no way to know it all. There's no way to be good at it. There's joy in learning and there's joy in upgrades. And so, I mean, there's tons of things you can do. We've mentioned a bunch of books that you can read. Maybe this is therapy or some sort of meditative or yoga practice. Really, it's just keep learning. If you're not learning, not only will that hurt you, it hurts your community as well, it hurts your network. So keep up with your security updates, keep up with your firmware updates, keep on moving forward.
I love that for the last one. Keep up with who you are. Constantly improve. Like read Atomic Habits is another great book recommendation. It's weird. This is like the most like business and self care book recommendations I've ever done. I always recommend like, hey, read The Land by Alaron Kong. Like I'm all about that. But keep up with your firmware. Constantly improve. Make the person today you are better than the person you were yesterday. And you can do that with your business. We know how to do the iterative process in our business and development and stuff like that. But have you thought about doing that with yourself with Atomic Habits? Make one small change today. Small thing, like you're going to make sure your phone is flipped over when you talk to people. One small
Yeah.
change. What's the change going to
Yeah.
be tomorrow? And those small changes add up into continue making you better. We see people who like some people stop learning when they're 18. They will
Mhm.
be an 18-year-old version of themselves for the rest of their lives. Or they'll be at the whims of society and what they sinks into them from the TV or media will just consume them because they're not being deliberate about what they're doing. And if you don't do that, then or if that's your life, then that's your life. But now you don't have control anymore. You don't have control of who you're becoming and what's going on in your life. If you think in terms of, man, I need to make sure I'm keeping on top of this stuff. I need to make sure like Adam Walter used to know a lot about network design. Today I'm like something I used to know. Today I can tell you a lot about how to manage personnel, how to build a good company culture. I can tell you a lot about how to take care of children. I can tell you a lot about different kinds of needs. I can tell you about autism. I can tell you about ADHD. I can tell you about depression and how to deal with it because I forced myself to learn this stuff because of situations in my life.
Yeah. I
And
have a
Go ahead.
I have a little anecdote that also kind of goes along with this.
Okay.
I have a little brother. He's 18. He's in college, and he just started learning piano. He learned piano. He started taking lessons his senior year, fall of senior year of high school, and he picked it up really fast. He played this amazing piece for the recital at Christmas that year. After 4 months, he was really, really good. And I say that because he is in college this year and he's taking physics at Georgia Tech. Um, and he's like, I don't understand how my peers who have never taken physics as well are doing so well. They just seem to grasp it and just understand it. And it's so frustrating to me because he's never struggled in school before. And so going to school, it's his first time struggling and he's like angry about it. And I was like, Chris, you've got three choices. You can either struggle through and go to tutoring and all of that. You can not care, or you can look at it differently, because look at piano. Look at the number of people who looked at the way that you learned piano and it was beautiful to you and it was interesting to you and it came easily to you. What they didn't see is that you spent hours and hours and hours listening to other people play, watching other people play, practicing your hand movements, your finger placements, which hand went over which, how you sat, your posture, your energy. All of those things were things that you spent all of your waking hours. When you were grounded from video games, you spent your time thinking about that. And so I think a lot of times we forget, we joked about this, that if you don't, you lose it. If you don't use it, you lose it. And I think that we often forget that it's not just about potential, it's about how we actually are investing our time and what we're spending our time doing. And so a lot of times it's like, oh well, I don't know this thing, I'm not comfortable with it. But maybe we just need to look at it differently. Maybe instead of it not coming naturally to us, we need to find the beauty in it. And so I think that's kind of the last little bit that's always interesting to me about this
Yeah.
conversation.
Well, I think, to give him, if he's listening to a podcast, a little bit of advice. As somebody who's heavily interested in physics, I would have been a physics major if there would have been a job in it. Um, the the things that are hard at first tend to weed out the people who will be the best at them later.
Mm.
Creative minds are really good at being creative, but then we have to learn the basics. We have to learn brush strokes. We have to learn finger positions, and we hate that part. But once we get the technique down, we can play. You can just
Right.
play.
Yeah.
And when you're learning a new skill, you have to get the technique down first, and then you can just play. And so a lot of times we give up before we start playing.
Hmm.
And so,
Yeah.
and you keep up with your firmware and you start making a lot of that technique automatic, you can start playing in your life. There are things in your life that are really hard because you have not taken care of yourself. You have not seen how it impacts you, how you have not read your own manual and think, how does this apply to me? And you have not engaged your firmware. So you don't have these things automatic. It's like math. Math becomes so much easier when you memorize the times and addition and subtraction and tables. If you
Yeah.
spend your time counting on your fingers, that's really hard. But if you update your firmware to say this is automatic now, you give your chance to play, to be creative, to start flowing with life rather than fighting against it all the time. So I love these three tips, Elizabeth. Put your mask on first, read the manual, keep up with your firmware, take care of yourself, then take care of others around you, and continuously improve. So thanks for coming on. And then you have a conference coming up. Can you put a
Yes,
plug
I'm
here real
helping.
quick where you're going to be talking and people can come check you out?
Yeah, so some version of this talk I will give at MSP Geek Con in Orlando, Florida, May 21st through 23rd. You can get your tickets now. There's actually only a few left. It's the first conference, and if it goes really well, maybe we'll do it again.
Great.
So yeah, mspgeekcon.com.
All right. Thank you. And we will see you there.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, Adam.